Good morning, DC. Welcome into the Blitz. How you doing?
Oh, doing great. Good morning, Martin.
All right, DC. I saved it for you. I didn't even bring it up. The SEC spring meetings. I intentionally just wanted to get the first thoughts we talked about coming out of the SEC spring meetings. Did Saban win, lose, or draw with the grad transfer rule?
Well, I think that's an interesting topic. Some people will say, well, he lost, but I think ultimately he wins coming out of the SEC meetings. Martin, the SEC meetings were kind of it was a little different this year. There wasn't very much controversy, but they discussed and handled a lot of issues, many of which didn't get the hype as the SEC transfer rule. But, of course, that was on the top of the list. Going in, you and I had talked about this once before. I believe we talked about on your show about some of the things that people were talking about the grad transfer rule and how much Saban was against that and why he was against it. Again, he spoke before they had the meetings. He spoke before they actually had the vote, and he voiced his concern about it. He told why he was against it. He took several questions on it, and he kept saying, why are you putting this on me? I mean, I'm just following the rules. I play by the rules. This is the rule, the SEC rule. If it's changed, then we'll follow that rule as well. But what happened was he's against it because he didn't want to see just free agency, as he called it, in college football. Everybody going after everybody's other players. Well, at the end of his speech that morning, he finally said what you and I discussed on your show several weeks back. He said, well, why? I'm against it because I think it's bad for the game. Why would I be against it because of Alabama football? I think it benefits Alabama football. I think he hit the nail on the head of what you and I discussed. As soon as this rule passed, Coach Saban, although he may have been against it in principle, may have been against the game, he's going to use it to his advantage in every way possible to work within the new rules. And I think what you have now is Alabama coming after your grad transfer players.
Oh, but they can't recruit. They can't recruit now, DC. Kirby Smart and Maury Smith just happened to know that they both were in agreement. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know. I'm laughing at you because you sarcastically, and that's what everybody was thinking at that time. Yeah, sure. No, I mean, there is Alabama recruits every day. You can say they can't recruit, but what they put out on social media, what they put out through the media itself, all the media coverage they get, every time they go on the field and win and play a national championship, that's recruiting. When Alabama shows up in the college playoff every time that they've had a playoff system, the new playoff system, been in that situation to win and compete for a national championship, that's recruiting. When every player who thinks about transferring and grad transfer in the SEC says, hey, I have an opportunity to go over there and play for a national championship. Let me see if I can't do that. I want to be over there. I want to see what it's like over there. I saw a couple of things happen this week. As soon as that rule starts being voted in, they announce it. The whole thing from the University of Alabama flips. The recruiting Twitter page starts going out there talking about how great it is to play for the University of Alabama, and don't you want an opportunity to compete for a national championship? It's very subtle, but I think it's saying the same thing Coach Saban says, hey, Alabama will benefit from this the most. Players wanting to come in and have an opportunity to compete. After all, every recruit that's ever been recruited by Nick Saban has an opportunity to compete for a national championship, and there's no other school out there that can say that.
Speaking with DC Capstone Report, DC, one of the things that Alabama had a glaring lack of numbers in the spring was the defensive backfield, and they went out and signed, a really strong defensive back class. Last week there was concerns that Josh Jobs would not qualify. This young man has qualified. He has enrolled. He will be a part of the Crimson Tide immediately, not just this fall. What are you looking at from a defensive back standpoint in Alabama? Numbers, whether they can play at a high level, or is that going to be an area that's really going to be suspect for Alabama in 2018?
Well, that's one of the things we'll focus on the podcast today, is that the defensive backfield is going to be a question mark, has to be a question mark, because of all of the ones that graduated or moved on as juniors into the NFL. We're talking about replacing 5 starters or significant playing time personnel in the defensive backfield. Actually, the only returner with any significant playing time, if you has to be Deontay Thompson, coming in at the safety position and did a great job in the final 2 college playoff games, substituting for Hootie Jones, who was injured. But that's the only significant playing time he's had over the time he's playing those two games. That gives him a leg up on some of the others. But having the good recruiting class coming in is great, because you have opportunity to develop players and see who can play and who can contribute now. Josh Joe being, of course, being eligible gives him another boost, because that's another player that has opportunity to compete for a starting position. I understand he was eligible this past weekend and already attended his first class at the University of Alabama, so he's on board, ready to go, already enrolled. And I think that they expected that to happen. Coach Saban spoke about that at his news conference at the SEC meeting. But if you kind of step back and look at it, absent Deontay Thompson, who has had some significant playing time or even mop-up playing time, you have to go back to Trayvon Diggs before his injury, playing some at cornerback. So I think we're going to look at replacing 2 cornerbacks, looking at replacing the person to play in the dime, the nickel, another safety. I think there's opportunities out there for people to take advantage. 2 of the players that we're going to highlight today is one, Daniel Wright, who all of us should know from his play on special teams. Before he had a little nicked up injury that caused him to not play as much late in the season, but early in the season he was very active on special teams, making some huge hits. He has a good speed, headhunter. I look for him to come back full, ready to go and be able to contribute. And I think his process and his injury has gotten really well over the off season, and he'll be ready to go when he comes in and compete for during the summer workouts. I think he's working out now, doing great. So I look for him to really compete and maybe play that safety position. There's others out there as well, but I think the one person that everybody's looking to see is Sevion Smith. Alabama was able to get him as a recruit out of junior college. He originally was a 5-star coming out of the IMG Academy there in Bradenton, Florida. He signed with LSU. He went to LSU. The situation there was not what he expected once he got there. He ended up transferring out, went to Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. And I think Alabama found him there. They were always interested in him. They followed his career there and were able to recruit him right out of junior college. So he has 2 years of eligibility coming in. I think he'll be able to come in and immediately contribute at the cornerback position. And there's some others that we have coming in. But anytime you have freshmen coming in to compete, you really don't know until they get on the field and start competing and seeing what they can do. And are they mentally ready? Are they physically ready to compete in the SEC? So I think first, Sevion Smith will have a great opportunity. I look for him to do some well, and on Daniel Wright. But overall picture, going in, our defensive weakest link would have to be the defensive backfield until it's proven on the field. They can put a good team out there together that can play together and play SEC quality football together.
Speaking with DC and the Capstone Report, presented by Golden Shores Production, you can find them on their weekly podcast on Mondays, and it's up on Monday afternoon and beyond. You can find them at Golden Shores Production. Speaking of the defensive backs, one of the things you have to look at is, okay, you have all of these guys coming in. You're trying to get them all ready and ready to play. You have to look at the coach that's going to be responsible for that, and that's one of the areas you guys are going to focus on. Carl Scott, give our listeners just a little bit of background on Carl Scott, and do you think he's going to be able to handle this task at hand?
I think so. Carl Scott comes into Alabama, and a lot of folks are saying, what's the connection there? How do we get him? Carl Scott, he's out of Houston. He's a Texas native, but he actually coached on the Delta State team that on last week's podcast, we focused on Pete Golding and what he was going to bring to the team. he and Pete Golden have a history. I believe that's kind of how we got in on Carl Scott. But he is a defensive back coach. That's where he started out in coaching, and he was actually at Texas Tech for a couple of years. Had some great all Big 12 players that he coached there. Did a great job of it. And he had accepted a position in Louisiana, Southeast Louisiana, as the defensive coordinator. But before he ever started that position, Alabama was able to get him in as a defensive back coach, and he's a great recruiter. What I understand, he's been able to come in and he's been able to develop a rapport with these young defensive backs. He's really been a athlete's man. He's young. He understands them. He's been a player's coach. But I think understanding that early on, he's been able to get in there and be vocal with them. Communication skills are really good. Coach Saban really loves his work ethic, working there, being there all the time, and trying to just hone in on the skills. And I think he has an opportunity as a new coach to come in with a new blank canvas there with those young guys and really mold them and make them into a good unit. I believe if they gel together, along with his tutelage and along with the help from Coach Saban, I think having Coach Saban help him working with the defensive backs, that's what he loves to work with. I think it'll be a challenge for Coach Saban. It'll be a challenge for Coach Scott to help bring this team together. So I look for them to have a really good opportunity to put a good defensive backfield on the team with Coach Scott's leadership.
All right. That's DC, the Capstone Report, Golden Shores production. DC, one last question for you, and tell our listeners where they can find you after you answer this. Just a quick 30-second answer on how do you feel about the rule in terms of if a team gets in trouble, that those players are also automatically able to look at other schools if a team goes on probation. That was one of the other rules.
Yeah, I think that that's a good rule in my opinion. I look at the kids. A lot of times when you see these teams that recruit kids, if there's anything going on in the background, they're being investigated. That happens for a long time. The actual process goes on for a long time. A lot of times they get caught in the wash, so to speak, of someone else's wrongdoing, and they're punished by it. And then sometimes it's the coach that recruits them that they fall into that category. So I think it's a great idea to be able to allow those kids to transfer out of those schools who've been found to be some kind of wrongdoing that kind of thwarts their career, kind of keeps them from reaching their full potential. I think it's a good thing to allow those players to transfer. So I think it actually was a good thing came out.